Off Call, the podcast where we meet the people behind the pagers and learn a little bit about monitoring along the way. Today, I am absolutely delighted to be joined by Leon Adato, a former ex relic like myself, and whiz around networking up and down the stack. And today, we're going to get into talking about it's the network. It's a common thing you hear developers lob as reasons for glitches and things going wrong in the system. And today we're going to unpack what is going on with the network and is it always the network's fault? Leon,
It's never
would you
the
like
net.
to?
Oh my gosh,
Never.
it's never the network. It's always DNS. Okay, it's never the network except when it is. And
Okay,
and I think
we'll accept that.
therein lies the rub, which is that for a lot of folks, especially DevOps folks who are on the devy side rather than the opsy side, is that it is this black box and they're not sure what's going on, and therefore I've checked all my stuff, so it must be that. Maybe not. And that's really the crux of our conversation.
Absolutely. And we still do have network engineers at many a company. I've had a whole networking team. So it is, you're kind of like, well, we'll let them look into it. It's got to be a network thing. That's what they're in charge of, right? But I'm maybe suspecting that it's a bit of a shared responsibility and something we should on the dev side care about as well.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, I mean, everything in tech is a shared responsibility in the sense that, yes, there is such a thing as MTTI, right? Mean time to innocence. What me? Ha ha. Right. We want to keep that very low. But
yeah,
if you stop there and you really just sort of walk away, you're a jerk. There's still a
agreed.
problem. And you need to, you may not have to take responsibility or ownership for it, but you can be part of the problem solving process. And also, I think anyone who's been in tech for more than 15 minutes knows that a lot of problems are multi element. Yes, you're right. These three things weren't the problem, but this other two things that are being masked by the network or the database or DNS or whatever it is. But once you resolve those things, those other two things that are your responsibility now show up clearly, and you still need to be involved.
Absolutely. I am a big fan of, sharing operational responsibilities, including investigations. And that is a little bit of why I wanted to bring this podcast out into the world. I asked myself a lot, does the world need another podcast? My answer to that was no for a very long time until I reflected back on the privilege that it is that you and I have both worked for monitoring and observability companies. And that gives us a pretty unique perspective in seeing behind the scenes, the backstage of how you render a metric chart over 5 years or 3 years. And what does that mean for every individual data point? There's a lot of stuff that when you're responsible for building and operating a monitoring system that you learn about how to do things better and how to interpret your data. And so that was a bit of why I wanted to bring you on. So we can give developers the tools to say, I confidently know it's not the network, and here's the data that I use to come to that conclusion. I think your ops and network team would be a lot happier if you came armed with facts and having done a mini investigation.
Absolutely. And turn it around. A lot of us have had to work help desk, and we've all gotten that
Yes,
call. Like the internet is down, or whatever it is, and it's clearly not. But what if a user had called us and said, hey, server number 7 seems to be having, 15 full seconds of latency on it. And I think it's related to interface 5. And also, I think that one of the function API calls is running a little slow. Like if they had said that, would you
that's a
say, why are
gift.
you hacking my systems? No, you would say, would you like a spot on my team?
Yeah, yeah,
We
absolutely.
should be that for each other. We should, we on the network team should be that for the database folks. We on the application development team should be that for the, on the network team or whatever. We should all have an interest or a curiosity in how the piece that we're responsible for fits into the larger ecosystem.
Absolutely. So, on this note, we're going to talk a little bit about your personal time being on the pager on call. And then we are going to flip back into a little bit unpeeling the layer of what data do we have about the network and what does it actually mean? Because I do think we suffer from an abundance of data, and data is not necessarily information. Data is just data. You need a bit of analysis and a bit of context around that. And so, how do we make sense of this piles of network, whatever bits per second going across links? Like, what does that all actually mean for us and our end users? So,
Right, right.
thinking back to your time on call, and just to confirm, you are not on call as of this recording. You have left the life of pagers behind.
It feels so good.
Yeah, it is. The water's warm over here. But
Yeah.
thinking back to the times that you were on call, I have to say, it's not always the most convenient responsibility to have. So, do you have memories of a standout time that you've been paged and it's just been inconvenient or silly or strange?
Yeah. Okay. So I will mention that there is a top slot of, worst pager call ever that I will not be sharing today. And I will allow your audience to let their imaginations roam wild and free as to what could possibly have happened to Leon that he wouldn't even be willing to talk about it, because I have actually no filter and I will talk about almost everything. Second place,
Understood. Understood.
yeah, second place goes to a boss who really loved testing whether I meant it when I said I was an Orthodox Jew, and that I really wasn't online on Shabbat, and so would find increasingly obnoxious reasons to page me out at those hours to see if finally they would say the thing that would cause me to, come online so they could say, "Ha! I knew you were just slacking off," and
Gotcha.
no,
It's all been a front. What a strange front to have. No, 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 no.
no, no. I would routinely turn the pager on after, and by the way, someone else was covering on call. It wasn't like on call was going on, I had
You had a
arranged for
plan.
somebody. And so the rest of the team said, yeah, yeah, he said, blah, 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 blah. And oh, look, the data center's on fire. Like literally, that was one of the messages. So that was obnoxious. Please don't be like that. When
Absolutely.
somebody
Yeah, this is
says,
what not to do, managers.
really. But the one that really comes to mind when you're talking about sort of festive was the 2 a.m. call. I got this more than once. 2 a.m. because there were
Okay.
snakes in an attic. Now, for context, I was not working in tech.
Huh.
I was actually working for a pest control company that specialized in wild
Okay.
animal removal. So this was a normal call,
Okay.
but 2 a.m., bleary eyed and bushy faced, about 20 years old, I was crawling up into somebody's attic into the insulation to go look for a snake that was also crawling through the insulation. The good part about it is I live in Cleveland, Ohio. We do not really have a lot or any poisonous snakes that are indigenous to the world. So I wasn't worried about
Okay.
necessarily
Say
dying that evening. Coming through the ceiling was an option. It was really just a matter of finding and then trapping the snake, who really probably didn't want to be there any more than I did.
totally. But I something related to on call is the thing I'm being paged for an actual emergency? And I have to suspect that snake had been having the time of their life up in the attic. And would it have, what was the rush? Why could this not have waited till 8 a.m., till 10
I
a.m.?
I I struggle with that one because if someone said there's a snake in the attic to me, I I would be hard pressed to feel like, oh well, that can wait. I mean,
Okay.
who
Oh,
among us has
okay.
watched snakes on a plane? Who among us hasn't worried about, like, it's I can
They're
understand
sneaky. If
both
you know their
sides of it.
location, you want to get them out before it has time to hide.
Before it has time to go somewhere else, like the bathroom or whatever. Like, yeah, I
Interesting.
sympathize. I
Okay.
sympathize with that group.
Wow. The
So
3
those are my
a.m.
top
page.
three. Yeah. Sorry.
Woo. Oh no, the 3 a.m. page. It's almost like a joke at this point that okay, the pager wakes you up and it's 3 a.m. And yeah, sometimes it really does happen. It is, but I've never been paged for a snake. That one is. I have a feeling you might take the top prize for best worst page.
I I hope I do. I hope that that is honestly the worst thing anyone says, because there's on, obviously there are worse, and I hope that this is the absolute worst one you and all of your guests ever have had to deal with.
I'll reach out at the end of the year with the pages, the awards that I just
Oh,
made up.
cool. We'll call them the pages.
Yes. So, um, thinking back, I have a hypothesis that a lot of us build our understanding of monitoring and observability and system health really through the lens of the first tool we were introduced to. Because everything after that, you compare it. How is it like New Relic? How is it like Prometheus? And so, do you have fond memories of the first monitoring tool you used? What was it?
That's such a loaded question. I have fond memories of it. So ignoring ping and traceroute, with which I think are a lot of people's first experience with the concept of monitoring. How do I know
Yeah.
something is there or up or not? But not really in terms of a robust monitoring system. The first one I ever used, and will be honest, okay, the gray on my hair is earned. I'm 57. I've been around in tech for over 35 years now. I started in IT when Windows came for free on 12 5.25-inch floppies.
The floppy
So
era. Okay,
yeah,
yes, yes.
yeah, and I'm like 5.25 inch, like those, not the little. So
Not
anyway,
the compact. Mhm.
yes, the hard disk floppy disks. Anyway,
I'm bad at
um,
naming things.
yeah, so not the 3.5. So anyway, my first monitor tool was Tivoli, which when I started using it had already been acquired by IBM, which made things a little bit interesting because what people don't recognize is that Tivoli is actually a drinking company with a small software problem. Like when you go to Planet Tivoli, which was their convention at the time, the bar opened at 10. It was
Oh
real.
my.
There's a whole other story going on with that, but um so Tivoli is really basically 15 Perl scripts in a trench coat. Like that is
Okay,
what you buy
okay.
when you get or got. Tivoli was a bunch of Perl scripts and an agent, like a super agent that could do anything. And that was it. And so if you
Ooh.
wanted to do something else, you had to code it. You either had to take the existing scripts and modify them or whatever. So do I have fond memories of that? Well, I like Perl. And so I really enjoyed learning how to become a better Perl developer. Many people who are developers today are probably feeling waves of nausea coming over them as I actually say the word Perl and developer in the same sentence. I apologize for that, but I had a good time. Also, the interesting thing about that first tool you use is that you have nothing to compare it to, and so it seems perfectly
Yes.
normal. The most outrageously impossible workflows seem totally fine, you know.
Standard.
And
Business as usual.
yeah, an example I use is that the first editor I ever used was VI. I was
Mm,
16. It was used as the default editor on a bulletin board system I was on. And so it was that or
yes.
Emacs or a Franken app called Fred. And so I picked VI. And so, colon WQ bang. Like, of course that's how you save and get out. That makes perfect. Right? Quit and
So
out.
intuitive. Absolutely intuitive.
And so you really have no basis for comparison. And Tivoli is like, okay, this is how monitoring and software distribution and inventory, like this is how it works. Okay. It
Yeah.
wasn't until I can look back on it from other tools and say, that was an absolute horror show. That was terrible.
Yes.
But at the time, two things. At the time, it really was top of its class. We're
I think
talking
that's
the
what we forget when we look back on the past, like, well, you have to take into the context of what else you had going on and where tech was. And it has not always been cloud, containers, microservice sprawl everywhere. We really built all this up from what sounded like
yeah.
a nicer, simpler times.
Yeah, it was a simplistic time, if nothing else. So it was top of class. It was the best you could buy, and it cost no exaggeration $1 million. And
So
so
monitoring being expensive is not new.
oh no,
No.
oh no 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 no. Now part of that was IBM. Part of that was IBM just
Ah,
wanting $1 million for things, and you could only run it on AIX servers, of course, because of course you could.
what is, may I
So
ask what AIX is?
it was IBM's custom version of Unix.
That's so wrong. Okay,
that
sure,
ran
sure.
that ran exclusively on IBM hardware. That cost, I mean, like the $1 million was for stuff, but
Wow. So it's a whole
Anyway,
ecosystem. Vendor lock-in, not this is what I'm hearing. Not new.
yeah, no,
Not new.
no. In fact, we've gotten so far away from it now in the course over time that what we have now is so minimal compared to, if you were a Sun, Spark works, like, running on Sun systems, that's what you were running on, and they could charge anything they wanted to. The days of CA and Unicenter and stuff. And I know this is sort of off track, but
Ooh.
yeah, lock in
No.
today is nothing like lock in yesterday. But going back to the original question, Tivoli, which I was responsible for maintaining, having never used it before, the agreement was, Leon, we know you don't know this, so we're going to let you learn on our time and our dime, and you are going to, do your best, and you're going to fix it,
Yep.
and you're not going to rage quit in the middle. And so it was a nice little partnership. Like, I got to, like, we will forgive the mistakes you make because you're going to keep on
Yeah.
trying, because the company had nobody else.
They gave you that space to learn. I What I loved about that, that's different from what I think a lot of situations devs find themselves in today is, yeah, you can learn on the job, and then but we're going to fill your time and your sprints so jam packed that just fit that learning in wherever you can. It's fine. And you're lucky to even get a learning budget these days. So I would encourage companies and managers to listen to this and to take some notes, like giving people space and time to learn, and importantly say, yes, mistakes will happen and we expect that, and that's okay, because in the end we will all have a better solution. That's the approach to go, because I we really just throw people into monitoring. We hand them the pager after 3 months. We say, you've got to be onboarded. Surely you know the ins and outs of
Surely.
incident response and our data. Good luck. Have fun.
And okay, so cautionary tale, the thing I just explained that they gave me space was hard won. They had a year before that brought in consultants to install Tivoli, again, $1 million, plus
Oh,
another $500,000 for the consultancy itself. They
oh
had it
yeah.
all installed, set up, and then the leadership bought into the lie that this is self-maintaining. You set it and forget it. It's just going to manage itself, and you just need teams to do the operation. So there was a software distribution team, there was a
Just the ops.
distributed monitoring team, there was an event correlation team, separate teams. Remember, using the same framework. And so one
Huh.
team would go in and change the framework level settings, which would completely bork two other teams, not knowing it. And so you ended up three
Sure.
months into it with these internecine team wars of somebody changing the framework and not telling the other person because they needed to get this done and hoping the other team didn't, blah, 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 blah. The entire system
Wow.
was collapsing under the weight of politics and lack of awareness, to the point
Yeah.
where they either had to write off $1.5 million and go find something else, and there wasn't anything else, or
Oof.
they could put myself, and it was two other people, and say, look,
Mhm.
you're just going to be in charge of the care and feeding of the Tivoli system, because it's obviously not set it and forget it. And we don't want
Yeah,
to bring
that
in
was a
another half
lie.
million dollar. Yeah, we don't want to bring another $500,000 consultants in to fix it. So good luck. So it was really nice that they gave
Wow.
us the space to learn, but they had already been to the bad place.
They felt the
So again,
pain.
yeah. And so managers don't, hopefully you don't have to piss on the electric fence first to know that it's a bad idea. There are already these cautionary tales out there. Give people space to learn, give people space to try and make mistakes, maybe invest in a demo environment or a QA environment or whatever it is. Like, I know it seems like it's a little bit extra for licensing, but it's actually not in the long run, etc. It's really the
A
right way to
playground.
go. Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh man, I almost love the cyclical nature of the trends, or just when I hear stories of people starting out their career, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have been there. I have been the person that had to get put on the team because the monitoring system was falling over, and in a strange way, the suffering kind of bonds. But I feel like I'm joining a long line of operators who have been there and done that.
a
We're not
long
alone.
August, a long and August tradition of failure and pain. Welcome
Yeah.
to the welcome to the family. Yeah, yeah, it's
Yeah, so we're not alone. Things I assume are getting better.
yeah.
I personally had to retire from SRE. I was very burnt out from a few back-to-back stints at startups, which startups are a great place to get your hands on a lot of technology, often pretty cutting edge. But the broad level of responsibilities while maintaining on call for a small team just really got to me. And so I was on call for 6 years. How many years were you on call and how did you manage that? Because I had to tap out. I'm very honest
So
about that. It's not for me anymore.
yeah, 18 years altogether, but I'm including the 2 years of pest control. So 16
Absolutely.
years of technical on call. Rotations as part of desktop support teams, sysadmin teams,
Yep.
monitoring engineering teams. And
Mhm.
my last on call experience, my on call rotation ended in 2014 when I pivoted to start working for vendors and doing,
Yes.
whether we call it developer relations advocacy or technical evangelism or like whatever, spokesmodel for
Oh, I like
IT
that one.
people. Yes, really.
Yeah.
There we go. So it was 16 years. And part of the reason why we didn't feel burnout was, again, it was a simpler time. I get 2014 where DevOps was just starting and cloud really, I mean, like Amazon had, I think, S3 containers in 2014, but they hadn't become the thing that they are today. So most of the work was on premises. Most of the work, we were still very much in the pets not cattle concept of, and I'm not making this up, we had servers named Hugin and Munin, the two crows from, and because they all were subsystems to Odin, the main server. uh,
Oh,
we had
yes.
we had routers that were named after the dwarves in Cinderella. We
Oh
had, I
my
mean, like,
god.
we knew that Odie and Garfield were the two VAC systems, and that Odie was
Yeah.
down, but Garfield would take over or whatever. We had named our pets and we knew them
Wow.
on a relatively personal and not intuitive, but deep
Yeah.
into level. So when there was a failure, it was a known failure. It was simpler in the sense there weren't microservices, there were no API calls. So when something failed, the troubleshooting process was fairly well known and well documented because it followed a standard routine. You either work from the back of the box, out to the wall, or from the wall into the back of the box, those kinds of things. So on-call rotations were much more um, predictable in what might
Yeah.
happen. And that probably kept a lot of the burnout from happening because just the pace of what could possibly be
Right.
wrong was very, very different. That didn't make it any less stressful when I was in hour
Sure.
46 of a 48-hour staying awake because email was down. Like, there were
Oh.
still those kinds of things. For a very
Yeah.
long time, at every company, there were a lot of applications and three religions. One religion was
Okay.
email, and then there
Yeah.
were two other ones that depended. Like, it might be order entry, it might be customer
Mm.
relation, it might be whatever. But there was three religions that could never ever be down, and then there was a bunch of other applications that you had to keep running also. And email was
Interesting.
down at this particular company for 48 hours while we tried to bring it back from the dead.
Oh, okay. Okay, simpler times, but incidents have always been stressful. The
Yes.
technology finds ways and these systems find ways to throw curveballs. And it sounds like there was maybe an implicit agreement or expectation that email was 100% available, would you say? It sounded like there was no tolerance from the users for downtime.
Yeah, there was absolutely, I mean, again, I won't say no internet, but internet was email for a large part, and a little
Yeah,
bit of web browsing. Like, online order entry wasn't really a thing at some parts of that. Again, that 16 years, which ended in 2014.
right.
For a long part of it, internet wasn't a thing at all, and then it was just a cute little novelty. You had one internet gateway, and people would sort of out to it to go check AOL or something.
Oh my
So it was
gosh.
much less, yeah, it was much less critical than it. Obviously, it wasn't ubiquitous the way it is today.
Yeah.
But even so, yeah, email was the means by which all corporate communication occurred. And that being said, I think every organization still has that breakdown of a couple of apps, two or three apps that are religions. They must always be
Yes.
there. They are the pillars upon which the company, at least culturally, is built. And then there's a lot of
Yeah.
applications. And the applications might be
Right.
important, but they're not at that stage of,
Critical.
yeah, business critical. And an
Yes.
important thing as an IT professional is to know what those are for two reasons. One, because you want to make sure they're up and running. As monitoring engineers, we both care about that. But two, if you want to make sure that your career is, and your projects get approved, always find a way to attach what you're doing to one of those religions. It
Yes.
has to somehow, fit in for monitoring engineers specifically. And I keep on saying that, and monitoring engineer, that's not a thing. Yes, it's a thing. It should be a
It
thing, and
is totally a thing.
it is totally a thing. Um, so, as monitoring engineers, if we can contextualize the monitoring software against those three religions, and Paige, this is something we talked about last week at the time of this recording. We were both at DevOps Days
Yes.
Seattle, and somebody asked about how do you make something relevant to the business? How do you help?
Yes.
I've understood for a long time talking with different, CFOs and things that businesses care about three things. Can you increase revenue? Can you decrease cost? Can you remove risk? And I think as monitoring engineers, we can speak
Mm.
to at least the second two of those.
Yes.
Is if you can make monitoring show how we reduce, we decrease loss and remove reduce increase revenue, reduce cost, remove risk, right? Got to say it again. So we can show how we somehow decrease cost and remove risk to the business. That will help justify the work we do and allow them to enable us to do more of it.
Absolutely. I think the best thing you could do as a software engineer is really understand the business and the space that you are in, whether
Yeah,
it's reading competitors who are public, their financial statements. How does a competitor make money? And really just uh, we should not be so distinct and be so far away and we just work on the beeps and the boops and the computers. You do work for a business or an organization that has a mission. How are you connected to that? Answering that and finding your why or why your team exists,
yeah.
very important.
Bob Lewis,
Um,
Bob Lewis was a pundit in a few different technical magazines for years and years and years, said something probably 25, 30 years ago that has stuck with me. He said, there are no technology projects. There are only business initiatives that have a technology component. And if you don't recognize that, you will very quickly tech your way out of a job. You will continue to stress the wrong things to the wrong people at the wrong times. So that's another,
it's a good nugget.
witticism or wisdom or whatever that you can take with you.
Yes. And on that theme, do you have any on-call advice for newbies? We've talked about how maybe the systems today are more complex, and yet there are so many parallels in the experience of the stress of incidents and this big responsibility of the pager that does affect your personal life. So for those who are about to hop on the pager, either they're a senior engineer at a new company or a new engineer for the first time joining on call, what should they keep in mind?
So the first piece of advice goes for both sides of the training experience. One, for the newbies, try to push for this model. For the people who are responsible for newbies, try to create or set up this model. And I call it see one, share one, do one. It's a model of the see one, teach one, do one that you find in the medical Sodoto uh, that you find in the medical space. See one, share one, do one. What I mean by that is when you're talking about a skill or a process or a workflow, the first thing is the new person should watch over the shoulder of the other person just doing it. Not hands on keyboard, not pair, not anything. Just watch the process start to finish. Ask questions either during or after, but make sure that they see what a good execution of that thing. So when we're talking about on call, that would be one whole on call rotation where the new person is, shadowing the other person. Now on call is kind of funny, right? It's not a constant, it's an interruption. So that person has to be nearby either in Slack or, you know, if you're in the old in before times, sitting in the cubicle next to them or whatever it
Yeah.
is, but able to be right there when the pager goes off, when the message comes in, so that, oh, every time the regular person who's on call gets a new ticket or a new message, they both jump into a shared space and they are seeing it and able to experience
Yes.
it in real time together. That's the C1. Share one is where that is happening, except that now there's a conversation. It's more like pair programming, or it's more like concerto for four hands. It is where both of you are working. Oh, I'm going to go do this part. You do that part. It is up to the person who is teaching to direct that action. Do not expect
Yes.
the new person to say, I'll do this part. Ha, ha. They will need to be given permission. And also, there's going to be a lot of, you need to go do this. Oh, you don't have access. Okay, we'll get you access in a minute, but this is what it looks like. And so then that's the share one. And finally, the do one is a reversal of the see one. It's not on your own, good luck, kid. It is where the experienced person, that's trainer, is there for every single page, every single call, looking over the shoulder of the new person and allowing
Mhm.
them to direct the action, so that if they have a question or they're not sure, once you've done that, and sometimes it takes a couple of cycles, sometimes you have to see one twice and then share
Sure.
one and do one. Sometimes you have to see one once, but the share one has to be a couple of rotations, and then the do one they're comfortable with, or whatever it is. But once you've gone through that rotation, see one, share one, do one, somebody is really set up for success. And nobody has to be dragged back in. There's no recrimination, finger pointing, blame storming, etc., that goes on with it. That's my first and most important piece of advice. The
Love
second
it.
for the newbies is clarify ahead of time what and who your resources are. Make sure you know before you start your on-call rotation where the knowledge bases are, where the docs are, and that you can access them. Again, make sure that you can get into every single
Access.
system. It's easy enough to read a doc that says, first go into the Gefrinkel system. And it's like, and then you're on a call and there's an emergency and it's like, oh gosh, I can't get into Gefrinkel and the person who gives me access is off on vacation till next week. Like, that's not the time to find out. And that is the time you will find
No.
out. Know who the SMEs are for all the systems that you're responsible for. So again, know what on call covers and what it doesn't cover, and know, if the system is really down, these are the people who are in charge, who own it, who are in charge of it, so that you can
Yes.
call them out if they need to. And before your rotation starts, meaning in the rotation before that one,
Mhm.
spend an hour each morning reviewing the tickets or calls or pages or whatever it is. Review them from the previous day with the person who is on call. That's not the see one, share one, do one. That is separate to say,
Mhm.
oh, now I have a sense of history of what has been happening right up to the moment when I'm stepping in and doing that, so
Yes.
that when that call comes, it's like, oh, that's been happening for the last 3 days, because now you know that. So
Yes.
that that has that process has served me in good stead to make sure that I'm not completely overwhelmed or outgunned in on-call situations.
Wise words of advice that having a proper handoff is yes. If you do not have a formal handoff process for your team, informal, it's hopping on a call and sharing the notes. Get that started today. It is, especially if your team is growing or you're adding new people to the rotation, that explicit handoff, there's a lot of valuable information to get passed back and forth.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's
absolutely. And
absolutely
on a,
critical. And organizations don't want to do it because obviously it takes time and it pulls people away from doing other stuff and blah blah blah. And yet, the question as a newbie to ask when they say, oh, we don't really need to do this, is, so we don't really want to be successful at this then?
I mean,
You know,
yeah,
oh no, you
yeah.
have to be successful. Well, this is what I need to be successful. It is as important as asking for accommodations with any sort of need. I won't say, it's not even disability. Any need you have, if you need accommodations, you have to ask for them. This is an accommodation, especially as you're starting. I need that
Oh, yeah.
hour of handoff. I need this in order to be successful. So either you don't want me
Yes.
to be successful, or we're going to find a way to make this work.
Yes, absolutely. So we talked a lot about on call. Let's talk about when you turn the pager off. What lights up your life when you're not off call? And conversely, when you were on call, what was these pages and incidents taking you away from?
Oh, that's good. Okay, so my hobbies, long walks on the beach and stuff like no. So obviously, being a person, Orthodox Jew, religion, it's not
Mhm.
really a hobby. However,
Yes, correct.
a life that has a religious, moral, or ethical structure to it often has its own sort of rhythm or structure that takes up time in the day and the week and the season and the year that that also conflicts in many cases with on call.
Yes.
That you have to find a way to make them work together because on call wants 100% of your time, and it becomes very difficult if you are required by whether it's parenting or caring for another person, whether it's a little person or a big person or whatever,
Yeah,
or a fur
sure.
person. If you have
Mhm.
care requirements, if you have religious requirements, if you have any of those
Yeah.
things, getting a page in the middle of it is not possible. There has to be a give and take to that. And so I spend a lot of time in my day and week and etc. With my faith. And that was
Mm.
always a piece that I had to find an accommodation for or a way to manage and navigate.
Yeah.
Also, something that my family and I like to do, we like to play games. We're very into not just Parcheesi and
Ooh.
Monopoly. Never, ever, ever play another game of Monopoly ever. Even like the Harry Potter or Disney novel. I don't care. I am monopolied
No,
out.
no
I'm
more.
rapidly, yeah, no, no, but we have like Kings of Tokyo and Munchkins and Exploding
Huh.
Kittens and Too Many Bones and lots of other games, both long running games and short, very quick games, cooperative and
Huh.
competitive games. Because on Shabbat, anything with an on switch is off limits. You can't
No
drive,
go.
write,
Yeah.
do all sorts of things. And so in the summer, because Shabbat runs from sundown to sundown, so you have all your daylight, that's really long.
Oh.
Like the day isn't over until 9:30, 10 o'clock, and
Yeah.
therefore you want things to do if it's raining outside or what have you. So we do that, and
How
to
fun.
relax, I actually do archery. I don't really hunt. I just go out in the back and I shoot targets. I'm not competitive about it. It is very zen for me. I just
Yeah.
If you follow my Instagram, it's mostly archery pictures because that's just fun and it's also not embarrassing
Yeah.
as a 57 white dude. There's not a lot of pictures that aren't usually incriminating in some way. I like to read sci-fi and fantasy most.
Ooh.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And finally, I'm a polyglot wannabe. I love languages. I like programming languages. I'm not very good at it. That to call me a script kiddie is an insult to scripts and kiddies everywhere. But
Oh
I do
no.
like programming languages. I
Yeah.
with Perl. I'm also very comfortable in PHP. I
Sure.
dabble
Sure.
in Python because it begins with a P, so of course I have to do that one too.
You got the
Um,
whole collection.
right, I have all the P languages are all in there, and also I support a Go open source library, so I support that. So I do a little bit of Go and stuff like that.
Nice.
So that's what I do in the off hours, and that's what on call is competing with. At least it used to compete
Yes.
with anymore because I
Right.
haven't done it for 10 years, and that I
Well
think
deserved.
I got out at the right time because I think if I was on call now, it would be a lot more stress inducing, honestly.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's what I really wanted to highlight is that just because we're on call, yeah, there's not an incident happening every second of every day, but to be in a 24/7 rotation for, 1 week on primary, you do try to live your life. And it is really frustrating if you are supporting an unreliable system or you happen to have that large incident. We are real people with real lives and hobbies outside of technology. And it's nice to be able to indulge in that when we're not officially on the clock.
It is not hard to move through the world and see somebody walking out of the movie theater, out of the regular legitimate theater, out of the amusement park, out, walking out of spaces on the phone saying, "Yeah, I just have to get to my laptop. Give me a minute." The one that was most heartbreaking for me, I was at Cisco Live one of the years. Cisco Live, for those people who've never been, is somewhere around 20, 25,000 people, usually in
No.
Vegas.
Yeah.
in
No.
this. The tickets themselves are north of $1,500 a piece, not counting travel and hotel and all the rest of it. So it is not a small thing to commit to going to Cisco Live for a week to learn and to hear talks and to build your career and grow. And I remember multiple years walking in on the first day, this massive, like, just stream of humanity coming into the space, and there's an equally large stream of humanity coming out. This is the beginning of the day, and every single one of them you could see are on their cell phone saying, yeah, no, I know it's down, I understand, I'm jumping on a plane, I'm coming back, I get it, and you're like, they just got here, and now their job is demanding that they come back. And that's another piece of the, how do you balance on call, is make sure that on call is tempered with a dose of reality. If you're going to an event, whether it's a 2-day DevOps days or a week
Hmm.
long vendor event or whatever it is, make sure that there isn't some bizarre expectation that you will also be doing
Hmm.
on call, that there are people to cover, even if it's second tier on call. Remember, we're talking mostly
Sure.
about what we consider as front line, but there's also escalation. Make sure that if you are an escalation point, there is a mitigation strategy so that you aren't being dragged out of these very expensive events or
Yeah.
experiences, you know,
Yeah.
that the joke is, I'm going in for kidney surgery, but I'll have my cell phone on the entire time and I'll be able to fix that system in about 10 minutes once the anesthesia wears off. Like, no.
I'll be reachable.
Yeah, no, I won't. And it's okay. Back to what we were saying about the snake in the attic. Like, a snake in the attic, some people would say, email being down. Some people would say that is absolutely business critical. I think a lot of people would be like, think it can wait 15. I think it can make it 15 minutes. I think that we can
Yeah.
last that long. That's part of, now we have these SLAs and SLOs and SLIs. Be
Yeah.
aware of what those are and live with, make sure they're set reasonably, intelligently,
Yes.
and live within them. Every call can't be an emergency to you or to people around you.
Yes. And if you are confused where to start, I think a lot of developers get bogged down in the SLI piece, the measuring. And the place I always start is I go to the terms and conditions. I go, if you have access to the sales contracts, I actually look at what we are legally telling and making an agreement with our customers to. And then I work backwards. And you will find a lot of interesting stuff in those contracts once you start looking. So I
Yeah.
encourage folks to not get bogged down in the weeds of this metric and the rate and the average over time. Please just don't use averages, but look at what the customer promise is, the legally binding customer promise, and work backwards from there. And if that's unfamiliar or strange to go to the terms of service or contracts, good. This is part of learning about the business. I think that's a good growing pain to experience.
Right.
So,
And to emphasize
go ahead.
something about that SLI. Remember that SLIs, SLOs, SLAs, SLMOUSEs is
Yeah.
uh, is that it's almost always based on the user's experience. And the reason I say that is that we get a lot of alerts and tickets and messages and interruptions that say that, system number 7 is experiencing 15 seconds of latency or whatever it is. Right. What's the user's experience? If the user's experience is the same, then yes, that is something that has to be fixed, but it's not an emergency. And I think that a lot of times we draw too much of a straight line correlation between a element or even a subsystem having a slow
Yes.
response and the user's experience. Almost all on-call tickets, the things that again drag you out of bed at 2 o'clock in the morning, the things that get you away from what you were doing into this, should be focused on user experience has been impacted in this way and we need to resolve it, not a disk is full or whatever. Those are things that have to be resolved, but they don't need to be a pageable offense. And that will
Yes.
also help you to make sure that the things you're interrupted for and the number of times you're interrupted while you're on call will be reasonable and manageable.
Yes, that is the goal. Everybody should have that as the goal, I think. Reasonable and manageable and actionable pages.
Yeah.
Well, I've got a couple questions to close us out, specifically talking networking. You work for Kentic, a lovely network observability monitoring provider. And this question is for the developers out there. If I am a developer and I'm unfamiliar with infrastructure and operations, I have ignored as much Kubernetes as possibly I could handle. But
Yep.
now I'm like, I want to help the Leons and Pages of the world. I want to help my network operations team. I want to be that person being the hero with here's this beautiful detailed bug report exactly showing that it totally is the network. What is the data that I can use and what should I be familiar with? So I'm looking around my monitoring tool. What metrics? What graphs? Talk us through this.
Okay, so first of all, this is where I'm going to make a pitch for network observability, which a lot of people
Yes.
think is an oxymoron. And yes, the company I work for makes a tool that does network observability fine, but nevertheless, be that as it may, it's important to have tools that understand it because the whole concept of observability is that there's so much data going on that one human brain can't typically reason about it.
Yeah.
So having something that will surface those events and contextualize them is incredibly important. Um,
Mm.
so any robust modern monitoring and observability solution should be able to pull the metric ass ton, that is a technical measurement by the way, metric ass ton of data and elements together to help you connect those dots,
Yeah.
and understand when you're looking at things what kind of information is available to you. I'm going to talk about the specific
Yeah.
technologies, but you need to know the difference between ping and SNMP. You know what it's telling you. Like ping is telling you something is up, and SNMP is telling you that an interface is down. And how come those two things can be happening at the same time? You need to have an
Ah,
understanding of what the data is able to give you in terms of status
okay.
or rate or what have you. Um,
Sure.
that's tool based. As far as specific information or things to understand, I think that
Mhm.
first of all, a skill I wish every developer had, I will say, for the love of pants, and I credit Chloe Condon with that phrase, for the love of pants, understand how IP addresses work. I'm not saying you need to know how to
Ah,
subnet in your brain, but know why those numbers are those numbers. Know why you can ping 74.208.236.13, but you can't ping 192.168.1.1. Like, why is that a thing? And so it's not a black box. You know,
yeah.
as an example, if you think that creating a subnet in your cloud environment that goes from 192.168.1.1 all the way to .100 is good because 100 is a nice round number and it looks nice and it's easy to think about, you are the problem. And if you don't
Look
know
in the
why that's a
mirror.
problem, yeah, if you don't know why that would be seen as a problem and why you are the thing that makes network engineers drink, that's why you need to understand why IP addresses work. And once
Okay.
you've wrapped your head around just IP addresses and how they work, a lot of other things fall into place. Routing and what routing is and what it does will make a lot more sense. Firewalls and which is really just another kind of routing, will make a lot more sense. The similarity between routing and VLANs and VPCs and all the rest, but they're different, but they're similar, will make a lot more sense. And you'll be able to use those things, which you as a developer are often asked to do when you're setting up your cloud environments.
Yes.
Just click, 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 click. Yes, you just click your way into a hellscape that doesn't work particularly well. Understand that.
Yes.
And beyond that, I said that the technologies, understand ping and what it does and what it doesn't do, understand traceroute and what it does and what it doesn't do, understand MTR, which is a different kind of traceroute and why it's different than traceroute.
Hmm.
And because once you understand those fundamental foundational things, you will see it reflected in the tools. You'll say, oh, they're getting the data from blah or blah. And you'll know, along with that SNMP, Simple Network Monitoring Protocol, good thing to
Okay.
just
Simple
understand
is
what
in
it
the
is,
name. I like that.
right? And understand what it is and what kinds of information you get. Understand NetFlow, a thing that a lot of people ignore and is deeply rich and has a lot of really important information for the developer as well as for the network engineer. And finally, your telemetries. There's open telemetry, which I think a lot of dev and DevOps folks are familiar with, but there's also streaming telemetry, which is more or less specifically Cisco's take on open telemetry, but it is being adopted in the industry. It is a variation of open telemetry, which means that if you know OTel, you'll have a
Hmm.
leg up on all the network engineers that are still right now today trying to wrap their head around streaming telemetry. And yet it is a
Ooh.
very network centric set of data and information that would be, and again, you should know, what do I get out of this, what don't I get out of this, how does it overlap or not overlap or whatever. And once you have
Yeah.
those things, then it becomes a lot easier to look at whichever tool you're using and say, ah, I understand, this is the stuff that matters, this is the stuff that doesn't matter. To put it into a DevOps context, every time DevOps people get a monitoring tool, the first thing they do is they set up a high CPU alert because it's easy. And yet, I will tell you that CPU alerts, high CPU alerts, are garbage. They mean nothing. High CPU was never a problem. It has never been a problem. And now there are things that include high CPU that indicate there's a problem, but high CPU by itself says nothing more than you have correctly sized this server or
The
this system.
computer is working.
And
He
it's
showed up to
working
work
good.
today. Yeah,
It's
yeah.
working good, or you're paying for stuff you ain't using. Maybe you have a problem. So you
Sure.
really like the same thing, in the networking space, bandwidth or whatever, like throughput, that may or may not tell you something. It's not necessarily simplistic, but as you learn what those technologies show you, it will become clearer where and how you can get to the real problems with your applications using network data.
I love it. Back to basics. We've got some foundational concepts. And really, how has networking changed in the last 5 or 10 years? I will tell you, I worked at a company that ran Kubernetes ourselves across a bunch of cloud instances. And one of my peers in stand up said, "Oh, I've switched us from flannel to calico." And I was like, why? Like, what could have radically changed? Like, doesn't all this stuff still talk to each other the same way? So I'm curious your take, having seen a lot of different hype cycles, and we're talking about how important the foundations and the basics are. What has really changed? Is networking today the same as it was?
A lot of the things have stayed the same. I mean, uh, electronic signals form bits, and bits are grouped into bytes, and bytes are formed into frames, which are structured into packets, and they move along copper at some point or another along the way, even if it's moving through the air in some of it. And that's still the same. The fundamental structure of
Okay.
how data gets from one place to another, the OSI model still is relevant. That's all the same. At the same time,
Okay.
I think what's really changed in the last 10 or 15 years is the scope and the scale. That if you think about, on-prem model, even model, on-premises model that was massively distributed, like, retail, McDonald's
Sure.
or Target or whatever, or just organizations that have a huge technical center of gravity where there's a lot of big data centers that do a lot of work, like maybe IBM or something like that. Even if you think of
Sure.
that in the on-prem, they bear no resemblance, and it is a order of magnitude less complex than what we deal with in even moderately sized cloud-based applications with microservices and ephemeral systems and containers and Kubernetes orchestration and
Serverless and yeah.
serverless and all of that stuff. Is that there's just a very different, now the network is still happening. The thing I think we that I want the audience to understand is that it's not either or, it's both and. That the thing I
Mm.
just described with the cloud and all that cloud infrastructure exists for many companies along with the on-prem that has always been there. That sure, there are a number of companies that are completely cloud native, that the only thing that isn't cloud is their employees set up in their home and the internet connection, and there is no office and there is no whatever. But the vast majority of companies across the world are both and. They have a cloud presence that they have to manage, and they have an on-prem, and they have colo, and they actually have multi-cloud. They have multiple things in multiple clouds all over the place, and those multiple clouds are talking to multiple different colos and multiple different on-prems all simultaneously, which makes it the worst of all possible worlds in terms of network engineering, because things are just moving in every direction. And is it fast? Is it slow? Who knows? And how would I like? It becomes a very difficult thing. So just be aware that yes, networking has changed in some ways, but mostly it has grown. Um, you
It's
know,
sprawled
it's that
out. Yes.
it's that tree house that started off when the tree was small, and as the tree grew, we kept on adding layers to it and levels, and so things have expanded in really odd ways. Another way to say it, it's
Yeah.
grown organically, and we all understand that when you want to grow something organically, the first thing you do is pile a bunch of poop on it.
Yep.
So there.
Well, I think that also serves as the answer. Has Kubernetes made networking engineers' lives easier?
Yeah, we were talking about this beforehand, and I said short answer, no. Long answer, also no. I'm not a
Yes.
Kubernetes expert in any way,
Sure.
shape, or form. The one thing I want to make sure, if people listening to this are Kubernetes experts or are, they work with Kubernetes and they're like, and I want to point out that every single Kubernetes cluster has a router, a real bits and bytes, packets and frames router in it. It's called IP tables, but it is a
Mhm.
router. And you are not serving yourself by pretending it doesn't. You're not serving your application or your organization by not monitoring that router inside your Kubernetes cluster as a router. You are leaving a lot of data, which is money, on the table by not including that monitoring piece in there. There's a lot of things you don't know if you don't monitor the actual network layer of your Kubernetes clusters, both in intra cluster, inter
Mhm.
cluster, and inter cloud cluster, like all that stuff. There's a lot of stuff that you don't know is happening if you refuse to include that in your monitoring schema.
Wow. I think we have given folks quite the study list and hopefully sparked some intrigue and
I hope.
curiosity, unpeel the layers of complexity behind Kubernetes, break down Kubernetes networking into the fundamental pieces that we've talked about earlier. If you've got an IP table, you've got IP addresses in there. What are they doing? How did they get there? These are questions we leave to you, the listener, to
Whew.
go forth, discover, and make friends with your network engineering teams. They are valuable and they can teach you a lot along the way. You're not alone. Well, this has been a lovely conversation. Are there any pearls of wisdom you would like to leave with folks? You've left plenty already.
Um, I would say, because a standard question is like, what should I be reading? What should I do? So the first thing I'm going to call out is actually you. If you're not reading pagerduty.com, PAI,
I'll
Jurduty,
spell it out.
please, that's important. I'll also throw out there that I do have a podcast that went for a while and I have to revamp. It's called Technically Religious, and there'll be links
Mhm.
to the Spotify and YouTube playlists in the show notes or in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe, that kind of thing. Also, I am a middle-aged white dude, so I have opinions and I like to share them because I can't help myself. And you'll find that on adatosystems.com. And
Yes.
then looking further afield, I think that there's some really good conversations to be had on Corey Quinn's Screaming into the Cloud.
Yes.
His podcast, it covers a wide range of everything from security to cloud to networking to application development, and you can learn a lot. I learn a lot from that. Also, Rachel Foster's Imperfect Genius series is
Ooh.
really great. It hits a lot of things that people don't often think to talk about. Um,
Mhm.
and then I will just mention that there are some shameless Kentic promotional things. There's telemetry now, and there's what's new at Kentic, and there's Kentic close up. There's some
Mm.
things there if you want to see more about really what's happening in the Kentic space. Because what we want to be is the Rosetta Stone for developers who want more network information
Yeah.
in your developer and observability goodness.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that what is the golden signal of the rate error duration? I'm like, okay, but what about the network? Or I guess the network rolls up into it, but you should be able to, if you don't have networking data in your service overview page or the one dashboard you go look at, go figure out how to add that, what data you've got. All
Exactly.
right.